Right, so good evening, and thank you very much, all of you, for being here. And I'd like to thank the President of the Athens Centre for this excellent introduction. For a moment there, I felt you had read my paper, but this would not be possible because I hadn't sent it. But I think I couldn't have asked for a better introduction to my talk, because what I'm going to talk about today is precisely the role of perception and of perceiving the crisis as one of the key determinants of the crisis itself. And one of my main arguments, as you're going to find out, is that the crisis at hand in Greece is not an economic crisis. It's primarily a crisis in our perceptions. It's a normative crisis, or if you want, a philosophical crisis as well. That's why I suggest that a possible source of drawing the solutions to this problem in Greece is philosophy itself. And what a better kind of philosophy than a philosophy that has sprung from the very place where the crisis is currently taking place. So I'd like to start from one of my favorite quotes from philosophy, which states that «Πάσα επιστήμη χωριζομένης δικαιοσύνης κι άλλης αρετής, πανουργία και ου σοφία φαίνεται», which means that all knowledge or science, episteme, when separated from justice and the other virtues, is seen to be cunning and not wisdom. And today I would like to talk to you about the topic of a science which, according to the ancient hymn to goddess Athena, as we know from the Orphic tradition, combines human craft and dexterity with spiritual vigor and inspiration in order to imbue the human soul with qualities which enlighten it and impart it wisdom. But at the same time as this science can enlighten the human soul, if it's combined with justice and virtue, if it is not, it can be one of the most threatening forms of cunningness. So, in some sense, we can say that the science of politics is a pharmacon. It is a Socratic pharmacon in the sense that if it is used in an appropriate way, it can become a poison. But if it is used in a way that combines justice and virtue, it can serve as a remedy, as a healing source. So my main question is, how can we benefit from the classical conception of the political? And how can we benefit from the phronesis of Hellenic civilization? Many people today think that this is an old tradition, it would be anachronistic to go back to the ancient Greece. Conditions had been different at the time. However, is that really so? How about we approach the Hellenic tradition in a creative way? How about we try to draw what was wise about it, what was valuable, and adapt it to our own situation? So what do I mean by the political? It is a polysematic term. So in politics we refer to the political as the set of practices and understandings or perception about the nature, origins and principles of political association. The political also encompasses the concepts according to which we portray political life. Okay? A third aspect is our understanding of human nature and its main features. Every kind of political approach, every kind of political theory, every kind of society that has ever existed has contained a core understanding of what the human nature is, what it consists in. Some people have said, for example, that human nature is inherently aggressive, it's inherently malevolent. That's, for example, the idea of Hobbes in English philosophy. We have another perception of human nature as cooperative, as inherently organic, as inherently in unit with other human beings surrounding it. The political also encompasses the character of community and the style of our political practices. The structural and institutional ways through which politics is practiced. So it also has a perceptive component, but also has a practical component. In what way do we practice government? Okay, what kind of regime do we have? How do we structure our institution? And what guiding principles of governance and policy making characterize our societies? And finally, and I think that's the most important part, what we call the political encompasses what we consider to be the ultimate ends and aims and objectives of politics. And in fact, I'm going to stress this aspect, this dimension of the political, because what has changed to a very considerable extent in contemporary Greek politics is the objective or the aim of governmental policy making. In ancient Greece, as I will argue, we had a very different perception of the political. Nowadays, we have a perception of the political which I believe Michel Foucault, a French philosopher, has described in an amazing way by introducing the notion of security and the notion of governmentality, which combines, as you can see in the word, the two words government and mentality. Hence, it combines the practical aspect of politics with the perceptive aspect of mentality that underpins governance, that runs, if you like a stream, enforcing the different political practices and community practices as well. So I would like to explore the perception of the political in ancient Greece and then move to our contemporary understanding of the political, and then finally assess some of the implications and possible suggestions for political healing of our current state of affairs. And I would like to say from the beginning that since here the audience is not only Greek and primarily is not Greek, I think that whatever is going to be said actually applies to Western societies in general, because the problem that Greece faces is not a local problem. It is a global problem, because it has to do with a mentality that characterizes Western structures in general, and not simply what's going on in Greece. Right, so as you can see from this interesting diagram, in order to perceive the Hellenic understanding of the political, we have to take into consideration certain key concepts that have structured the philosophy of the Greeks, that have structured Greek mentality. On the one hand, on the left-hand side, you can see essentially an ontological set of concepts, which, however, are found in a direct relation with the right-hand side concepts, which refer more specifically to the realm of the political. So on the left-hand side, we see these three key concepts of nous, or on, or eth, okay, the good, the being, and the mind, cosmos, as the universe, the world, creation, and physis, which is nature. So according to the Greeks, nous is, I'm just going to run ahead and then come back. So nous is pure consciousness, or the pure intelligence that serves as the first cause or the first principle giving rise to all creation. In some sense, medieval writers consider that to be God. Okay, but in ancient philosophy, it has a secular dimension, if you like. It does not exactly refer to God in the religion sense. It has certainly a philosophical and secular aspect, which is lacking from other religious approaches. So it is a force which formulates the world and continuously participates in it, since it is constitutive of it and imbues it with the qualities of intelligence and the mind. And the main function that this pure intelligence, this overarching mind has, is that it takes unorganized matter, the prima materia of the Latins, and gives it form, imparts it structure, and in this way, by giving it order, it creates the cosmos, which means the organized world of senses, and the organized sense that world that we perceive nowadays, and in which we as beings live. And the key function of this nous is to imbue the prima materia with logos, with mathematical proportions, with taxes that give it harmony, symmetry, and essentially create the jewel. The cosmos means jewel in ancient Greek, from the Greek word kosmima as well. So it creates a perfect symmetry, a world of aesthetic order and aesthetic excellence. So by inserting logos and order, chaos is transformed from disorder into perfectly ordered and beautifully arranged structure, the cosmos, which is essentially, as I said, an aesthetic creation. And then we have nature. What is nature? Nature, or physis, is the manifestation of nous, of intelligence, into form. So once we have the creation of the cosmos, we have the principle of mind working through nature, okay, such that it combines matter and mind into one. And these two principles of the world, if you like, these two forces work together hand in hand throughout creation in the form of nature. So we're seeing, as you can understand, that the ancient Greek understanding and perception of nature, of physis, is quite different than our own today, because it contains the element of intelligence. Okay, so according to an ancient Greek saying, that which is above is like that which is below, and that which is below is like that which is above, and you can see the atom on the left-hand side and a picture of the universe on the other. And why is this important to our discussion? It is important because according to Plato and Aristotle, according to the Hellenic understanding of politics, the role of the politician resembles very much the role of the nous. Okay? So, inasmuch as the cosmic nous brings order from disorder and imparts harmony, structure, mathematics into a dispersed matter, in the same way the politician is asked, is called upon to bring symmetry, harmony and order into the social energies and social forces, the material aspects of human living to human beings themselves, to the characters of the human beings constituting a polity, with the aim of creating a harmonious society. So if we go back to the diagram, we see that accordingly and in correspondence, the three main ideas or concepts that structure the Hellenic understanding of the political is virtue, arete, which is a principle, and if you like, it is a characteristic of man, of anthropos, polis, and pedia, or education. So, since mind, if you want, this intelligence that runs through everything, through every structure that we experience as human beings, is a synonym of goodness, according to the Platonic view. In the same way, virtue is the expression of goodness at the level of human constitution and human interaction. This virtue is supposed to be the guiding principle, but also the ultimate end of polis. Polis, in some sense, as we said, is an analogy of the cosmos. It is what is created when order enters into the way people interrelate, into the way people combine resources and characters into creating a community. Once this community is organized according to the precepts of logos, according to the harmonies that the politician should be aware of and should know through education and philosophical pedia, then we have the creation of a jewel, of a small cosmos, of a human cosmos, which is called the political. And the main function of the political is pedia. I know that today this might sound a bit strange because we have, I think, an instrumental view of education. We think that education is something we obtain in order to perform something else, in order to perform, for example, an economic function, or have a profession that serves a social function. However, for ancient Greeks, pedia was also an end in itself. And I would like to read to you a very nice quote from one of my teachers, John Anton, who states that the basic role of pedia was to reveal and articulate the enlightened habits and practices which are necessary for human realization. Education, as embodiment of pedia, determines the contours of any civilization, and this is what happened to the civilization of the Greeks too. Finally, all education is politics. It takes place within the politics, pedia takes place within the politics and determines in it. So you can see that there is a distinction between pedia and education. Education is in some sense the training or the process that the human character undergoes in order to mold his or her soul. However, pedia, according to the ancient Greeks, refers to a much broader educative process an emancipatory process of the soul, according to the ancients, that shapes not only the individual character, the individual soul, obviously the functions and the actions that the person is going to perform, but most of all shapes the contours of the society itself. So the goal of politics, according to the ancient Greeks, is pedia, and the end state, the end goal of pedia is eudaimonia. I don't know how many of you have heard of this concept, if you've heard it in Aristotle, right? It is a very, very key concept according to the ancient Greeks, because eudaimonia is a psychological state that any human being can obtain by practicing and realizing internally virtue. Virtue comes through practice, comes through mathesis, education, but also through the laws. So the legal system, the legal framework of any polis is going to give to its citizens an example. It's going to lay out certain practices that human beings are going to have to practice in their everyday lives. And this is going to serve as a source of education, which is going to mold their souls accordingly and imbue them with particular habits. So the law gives people, provides for people certain habits, and these habits actually interact with his or her soul and the way the soul is accordingly balanced and organized. So since virtue is a characteristic of the soul, the laws are a source of psychic, if you like, education. So we have the law as encompassed within the concept of pedia, and pedia's goal being eudaimonia, as is the same for the goal of the society as a whole. So in short, we can say that this is the main understanding of the political that the ancient Greeks had. The political is there to help the human person cultivate his or her soul, become a better person, and contribute to the creation of a harmonious society. Therefore, the number one objective, if you like, is the psychological happiness and stability of the citizen. And I would like now to juxtapose this understanding of the political with the contemporary perception of politics, which we see nowadays. And to that end, as I said, I'm going to bring in some ideas from Foucault, from Michel Foucault. So, governmentality and secularization, governmentality is the word you saw before, and secularization, which you see here, are two key notions introduced by Foucault. And let's start with governmentality. Governmentality describes the different sets of methods, ways, technologies of governance, but also the mentalities and rationalities through which subjects are governed. On the other hand, security is a particular way or a particular form, if you like, of a governmentality. So security arose in Europe around the 18th century. It had political economy as its major form of knowledge. And it was basically a kind of approach to politics which stopped focusing on people as citizens, or stopped focusing on particular governmental objectives such as authority, okay, such as sovereignty, and started placing certain more economized concepts at the core of political thinking and governmental policy making. So, according to this version, government is no longer a matter of guiding or leading, and it's not at all a matter of educating one's soul. Rather, government becomes a management, and particularly a management of averages, proportions, and estimates of probability. So, security is a kind of approach to politics which resembles an economical or χρηματιστική or financial, we would say better, approach, rather than any ethical or, strictly speaking, political one. So it is numericalized and scientified. It uses technology. It uses the different economic sciences that had emerged at the time in order to perform the goal of ruling, of political governance. So in the case of security, there is a major ethical change that happens. Whereas all the centuries before the 18th century, we had ideas such as wrong and right, bad and good, serving as the core conceptual structure of any political regime. In the case of security, we no longer have a binary division between the permitted and the prohibited. We don't anymore have an understanding of what's good and bad and how government must enforce goodness and prevent badness. Rather, the regulative principle now consists and is given by an average of optimality that must not be exceeded. So questions regarding what constitutes the socially right and wrong give way to a logic which asks, for example, what is the socially and economically optimal level of criminality in a society? What are the relevant costs and benefits of granting equal opportunities, for example, to the disabled? And what is the economically affordable rate at which to do so? Therefore, in the case of security, there no longer exists a clear set of moral or political rules or an overarching perception of ethics guiding political life. So the first dimension of securitization, which I think that we definitely see nowadays in contemporary Greek polities, is the numericalization of political life. So if we observe public discourse in Greece since 2009, we see that the political life here has been taken over by numbers and economic indicators. So the political discourse, if you observe it through the internet, through articles in newspapers, no longer raises the question of ethics or political rules or political norms in order to address certain key policy dilemmas going on right now in this country. So what appears, if you'd like, by a simple survey on the newspaper front lines are indicators, the amount and percentage of unemployment, of debt, the fluctuations of GNP and GDP, the level of prices, the level of spreads, very interestingly. So, as you can see, this numericalization of political life can be taken as an expression of the securitization of Greek politics. Because instead of considering concepts such as happiness of citizens, ethics of particular policy measures as important, we consider certain economic indicators to be the ultimate source of authority and legitimation of political practices, and particularly of the performance of the government itself. So, along with this transformation of public discourse, which has neglected other more normative aspects in favor of an economical approach to politics, has been that the standard model of legitimacy has changed in Greece at the moment. And I think that this has been happening in other countries in the world as well. So instead of considering, as you know, the local model, if you know of it, has had it that the legitimacy of a government is derived by people's consent to the authorities and the policies, nowadays what we see as a prevalent mentality in Greece is that the legitimacy of any government or any measure is going to be derived by the extent to which this measure or government is able to fulfill certain economical obligations. Whether the government is going to repay the debt or whether the economy is going to perform according to some economic standards of optimality. So, as you can see lately in Greece, anything goes in some sense from the government's point of view, as long as a debt is cleared and as long as economic therapy is being advanced. However, the ethics is not discussed, and most of all, I think most importantly than anything else, is that the fact that people has become the instruments of bringing about certain economic ends is another aspect that is not being discussed in public discourse. So, for example, the fact that in order for the economic revision and economic restructuring of the country to take place, we need to sacrifice a couple of generations living very close to conditions of poverty is not an issue that is very much discussed in considerations of policy making. The fact that people are going to have to pass through an austerity period is not discussed, or it is diminished in importance when compared to the economic afterlife that is promised in a messianic way through the current policy making and agenda. So as you can see here, I just have found a few examples from the internet. These are newspaper front lines. And for those who can read, you can see for those on, I'll just try to describe very briefly that everything talks about, almost all headlines talk about the debt, about taxation, about a shock doctrine essentially, because the word shock features a lot around newspaper headlines these days. So yeah, all these headlines concern taxation, pensions, etc. So the second dimension of the security, which is also present in current Greek politics, is the event. What do I mean by that? Is that in a securitized polity, the unit of analysis is no longer the individual or the collective community which bears a concrete national or political identity. The unit is not even the market. It is rather an event, or more precisely, the probability of an event which is subject to fluctuation and whose prevention becomes the central axis around which political organization comes to be structured. So Foucault, again, in explaining the event as the main unit of analysis of politics under a securitized version of the political, mentions the example of the scarcity of grains in France in the 18th century, when basically all considerations of the political started to be structured around how the scarcity of grains was going to be prevented. And even the architectural design of certain polities, of certain cities, was designed according to how the scarcity of grain can be prevented. So, easy analogy to draw, in Greek politics as well, we see that instead of any normative ideal or political ideology, instead of human beings or their education being the unit of analysis or the object of political policy making, we see that, again, an event has taken the place of all those aforementioned candidates. And this event is the debt. It's the possibility of bankruptcy, or the prevention of the debt, or the elimination of the debt. But in any case, it is again an event that has, likewise, scarcity, been placed at the center of our political considerations. Literally every day, for those who have been here, we hear the media obsessively preoccupied with the debt. And in fact, most of the governments that have been in place since 2009 have been built around the concept and phenomenon of debt, whose fluctuation has become the main end, if you like, of policy making. Again, these are some other examples of headlines that just talk about the debt. The third dimension of security I would like to mention is the population, as Foucault calls it. So in a regime of security, the subject of political action and object of political agendas is differentiated in another crucial respect. Security introduces a new political personage, a new category of collective subjectivity, that it is no longer the individual or the collectivity, but rather is the more technical and instrumental notion of the population. So in Greece, or anywhere this phenomenon arises, we can talk about the reification of the political subject. I don't know how many of you know the word reification or the concept of reification. Okay, so reification, you do? Would you like to tell us? No.